In 1665, the Royal Society published the first issue of Philosophical Transactions, giving a public account of scientific undertakings. This journal established the principles governing science for centuries: peer review validation and public distribution. With the Internet's advent, the physical costs of distributing this research dropped to near zero. Logically, access to scientific discovery should have become universal. Instead, research became more restricted than it was in the era of print. This restriction was driven by a specific economic trend, known as the serials crisis. Legacy publishers began raising journal subscription fees at rates that far outpaced university library budgets, leading to a massive inflation in the cost of access. Consequently, much of the world's taxpayer-funded research was enclosed within private institutional paywalls. Findings in medicine, technology, and climate science were effectively cordoned off from the public that funded their creation. The open knowledge movement is a systematic effort to re-engineer this 350-year-old publishing architecture, addressing the core mechanics of data sharing. It focuses on who truly owns the information, rather than simply looking at the price of a PDF. Modern academic publishing is now defined by this tension, the struggle to move research from a private, monetized commodity back toward its original function as a global public good. To understand the modern crisis, we have to look at the original linear model established in the 17th century. It moved sequentially from the author to the publisher and finally to the reader. Scientific societies eventually added a layer of quality control to this pipeline. They inserted a peer review process to validate claims before they reached the publisher, ensuring the credibility of the record. In the 20th century, Eugene Garfield introduced citation indexing. By tracking how often a paper was referenced, publishers could assign impact metrics to journals. This created a feedback loop where high-impact journals became essential for career advancement. Because researchers were required to publish in these specific high-impact journals, a small group of legacy publishers gained immense pricing power. They became the sole providers of the prestige necessary for academic success. This power shift created the serials crisis. As publishers aggressively increased subscription prices, library budgets remained static. The link between the research and the reader began to fail. The system reached a breaking point because the service of peer validation had been used to build a profitable, monopolistic gateway between scientists and the public. To resolve the bottleneck, the scientific community began building structural bypasses around the traditional publishing model. In 1991, the creation of arXiv introduced the preprint. This allowed researchers to share their findings directly and immediately with the public, bypassing the long delays and costs associated with traditional journal production. By 2001, the Creative Commons framework provided the legal infrastructure for this shift. It allowed authors to retain specific rights to their work while granting the public the right to reuse it, offering an alternative to the standard copyright transfer required by legacy publishers. These efforts were formalized through the Budapest Open Access Initiative in 2002 and the Berlin Declaration in 2003. These documents established the international standards and definitions for what constitutes open research. Open access was not a single discovery, but a coordinated legal and technical effort to physically reroute the flow of scientific knowledge. Shifting away from subscriptions created a new economic challenge. If the reader is no longer paying for access, we have to identify who covers the costs of hosting and peer review. In the Gold Open Access model, the research is free to the reader immediately. However, the costs are shifted to the author or their university through an article processing charge, or APC. Green Open Access involves self-archiving. An author publishes in a traditional journal, but places a version of the manuscript into an institutional repository, making it free to the public, often after a set embargo period. Diamond Open Access is free for both the reader and the author. These journals are typically subsidized by academic institutions or societies who view the publication of research as a core part of their mission. Finally, the hybrid model is used by traditional journals that remain behind a paywall, but allow authors to pay an APC to make specific, individual articles open. The choice of model determines whether the financial burden of sharing research falls on the individual researcher, the university, or the academic system as a whole. Providing free access to a final paper is only a partial solution. If the datasets and the methods used to reach a conclusion remain hidden, the research cannot be effectively verified. In 2021, UNESCO established a new framework expanding this goal. They shifted the focus from just open access to the broader concept of open science. This framework applies transparency to the entire research lifecycle. It advocates for open methods, open peer review, and open educational resources, ensuring that every step of the scientific process is visible. To make the raw data useful, it must follow a strict set of standards known as the FAIR principles. Without these, open data is often too disorganized to be reused. FAIR data must be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. These principles ensure that data is structured so that both human researchers and machine learning algorithms can work with it. Scientific transparency requires providing access to both the final result and the raw ingredients used to produce it. The publishing model has evolved from the rigid, linear pipeline of 1665 into a decentralized and interconnected network of open science. However, this new system faces its own challenges. High article processing charges have created a new financial barrier, preventing many researchers, particularly those in developing nations, from publishing their work in prominent journals. Additionally, the author pays model has led to the rise of predatory publishing, where companies charge fees to publish research without providing genuine peer review or validation. Because of these shifts, the role of the modern library has changed. Libraries are no longer just purchasers of content. They are managers of data repositories, curators of FAIR data, and advocates for more equitable publishing models. We can trace this progression through 4 milestones: the birth of the journal in 1665, the rise of preprints in 1991, the formalization of open access in 2002, and the adoption of the Open Science Framework in 2021. The scholarly ecosystem has moved from a period of physical scarcity through a period of digital restriction and toward a model of research as a complex public good. For the information professional, navigating this new architecture is now a core requirement of the field.